Welcome to Totally Talent Podcast by HR.com, your go-to source for all things talent. Whether you're looking for expert insights on high-volume hiring, the latest trends in recruitment technology, or strategies for building a winning team, we've got you covered. Join us for each episode as we dive deep into the challenges and opportunities shaping the talent landscape today. Let's get started.
Friends, welcome back to another edition of Totally Talent. I am your host, Mike Wood, and of course we are on HR.com and our podcast network. And I have a thrill of a guest today, Torin Ellis. He's going to join us to talk about the new executive order about woke bias in AI. But I want to give you a little bit of a picture of this is just a snapshot of who Torin Ellis is. So he's a true force in the world of talent, diversity, and unapologetic truth-telling. Torin Ellis, he's a respected diversity strategist. He's a public author and host of the popular podcast Crazy and the King. He works with organizations to turn bold conversations about equity and inclusion into real, measurable action, whether he's on stage, consulting with leadership teams, or sparking dialogue online. Torin brings passion, perspective, and a relentless commitment to reshaping the future of work. And above all, Torin, what I love about you is you're real. You're not afraid to point out what's happening. And so welcome to the show. I'm thrilled to have you on.
So one correction and one fun fact. Correction is we no longer, unfortunately, we no longer record Crazy and the King. I love Julie, and I mean that sincerely. I'm not just saying it for the microphone. I have a deep love and respect for Julie Sowash. We stopped recording about a year and a half, 2 years ago at this particular point. But you can still find episodes of Crazy and the King. The fun fact is 10 years ago, Mike, almost 10 years ago to this month, I was walking in the airport in Dallas. I had left SourceCon, and my phone is blowing up via text message, and I'm trying to figure out why all of these people are saying congratulations, because the text messages are coming from people who were not at SourceCon. And so one person decided to pick up the phone, because I'm thinking like, yo, I killed it at SourceCon. I got to meet Johnny Campbell in person. You know, it was an amazing event, but I'm like, I'm not getting congratulations because of that. I'm getting congratulations, Mike, because an article came out here in Baltimore and it listed 10 people that should run for mayor. And I was like number 7 or 8 on the list. And so that's a fun fact. A lot of people don't know that people were suggesting that I should run for mayor of our good city of Baltimore. So I'm not a politician. I am absolutely principle over technique and tactic. I'm absolutely activist, as you say, and most importantly, I am going to be unapologetic. So thank you for having me.
You speak for the people, and
Absolutely.
that's why they asked you. I would have said yes, go into it, try it out. I can only imagine how horrible politics is once you actually get into it. But the mission, I'm sure you've been able to do a lot around Baltimore, just, in your community.
Absolutely.
Outreach.
Absolutely.
So I want to talk to you today about this like Trump executive order on AI bias. So you're a recruiter, you were a recruiter, or at your origin story, and we've both been in the HR tech industry for a very long time. And for the past 5 years, we've been talking about reducing bias and being able to point out unconscious bias to people, whether it's in job descriptions or whatnot. This new executive order, essentially, it was passed. Well, it was written at the end of July. A lot of people haven't heard about it. It got flagged to me just in my news monitoring, but I was like, wait a minute. Okay, so the Trump administration is saying essentially two things. You have to have your AI model has to be factual, historically accurate, objective, scientifically grounded in responses, acknowledging uncertainty when appropriate, truth seeking. That's one. Here's the problem. Number 2 is ideological neutrality. AI must be nonpartisan and avoid embedding dogmas tied to DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion concepts, such as critical race theory, systemic racism, transgender recognition, just that they exist, or unconscious bias, whether explicitly prompted by the user or not. So it's the GOP slant of naming something where you're trying to get rid of bias by actually putting bias into it, and that's where like, so now we're not going to flag job descriptions for any language that could be unbiased. I want to get your original thoughts on this, because it just seems to be written a little slanted to me.
Slanted for sure. But before we go there, it's probably fair if we set the stage and roll it back just a few months before July. Let's actually go back to I want to say August, September. Don't quote me on the time, but Q4 of 2024. And the Congress was trying to pass or the Senate, I can't remember, was trying to pass an anti-DEI bill. So it has been, and even before that, in the first Trump administration, right around September of 2019, they had started to attack DEI as related to training in the federal government. So none of this really came as a surprise. Mike, I will tell you, the surprise for me was the when you think about forest fires, when you think about the fires that typically happen in California and in other places, they spread rapidly. And so what was a surprise to me was how fast it spread in the corporate corridor once he got into office this second time. So you had them attempting to pass the anti-DEI bill in Q4 of last year. You had the Trump administration sign as one of the first executive orders, number 14151, which was radical and wasteful government DEI programs and preferencing. We won't go into the entire bill. Then you had behind that executive order number 14173, which was ending illegal discrimination and restoring merit-based opportunity. And so the challenge that I have when I engage with some of this policy is the direct and demonstrative attack on certain communities, and the absence of that attack on other communities, and then an individual not being able to connect the dots and say that it is an attack on communities. Let me give you an example. You just read from the anti-woke bill. I want to go right back to that. And I'm going to repeat it for your audience. In the AI context, and this is coming from Preventing Woke AI in the Federal Government, July 23rd of this year. It says in the second paragraph or third paragraph, in the AI context, DEI includes the suppression or distortion of factual information about race or sex, manipulation of racial or sexual representation in model outputs, incorporation of concepts like critical race theory, transgenderism, unconscious bias, intersectionality, and systemic racism and discrimination on the basis of race or sex. Mike, let me just say this to you. If that paragraph would have included language that you typically find in a Jewish community, or references to events that happen in Jewish history, we would have a problem. If it had language that specifically spoke to the AAPI community or Muslim community, you would have a problem. And so what I want people to understand is when you reread that and you read it a couple of times, he is using language that is specifically found, I would say 90%, in a Black community. Critical race theory was something founded by African Americans. It is a legal framework and structure taught at the secondary level of collegiate schools by people from my community. So it was impossible for me to read it and not immediately say, I'm willing to give you a pass on the first executive order. As hard as it may be, I'll turn my eyes, a blind eye to the second executive order. I won't pay any attention to the banning of certain terms like climate crisis and diverse backgrounds and gender identity and people with the uterus and racial justice and transgender. I'll absolutely turn my third cheek to that whole list of banned terms in the federal government. But at some point, you got to call a spade a spade. And this is one of those points where I'm calling a spade a spade. This right here is problematic and it's an attack. And where I ask my question is, you raised a point around job descriptions. I didn't get granular. I'm okay getting granular with you. And I apologize for the long response, but I'm almost finished. I can get granular with you. I asked the question when I saw that, how will this impact HR tech? I didn't get specific. I just asked a very general, how will this impact HR tech? Because I already feel if these providers, OpenAI and Anthropic and some of the others, DeepSeek and R1 and some of the others, if they build and train according to this language, then it absolutely is going to impact how generations behind me and even us perform research in the civilian sector. I'm just not sure yet how it's going to impact HR tech.
And it's just, to me, it's okay. They're going a step back and they're trying to define reality, beyond like truths that anybody can see, anybody can has had these life experience where they've seen truth. No, they're saying no. It's this version of the truth. That's the real truth. So they can't get rid of their racism. So they're trying to define, well, racism isn't that bad, or it's really reverse racism or whatnot. And so the whole attack on facts and that we can't, like, I'm a history nerd. I'm a huge proponent of, if we don't remember what we've done before, we're doomed to repeat it again. And the fact that, even in schools and stuff, we can't even talk about the civil rights movement anymore because that's going to make some people feel awkward. It should make you feel awkward. Like, this wasn't that long ago. Like, and our kind of descent into fascism, and I try not to get into politics too much, but it's scary that we're not even 100 years away from the last fascist regime that we all had to deal with, and we're just sliding into that way. And as tech providers, like, all of a sudden HR tech is on the forefront of this. Like, are we responsible for the discrimination that exists? And so, like, the AI order is basically like, okay, let's just call it by a different name. Let's take all these grounds back. It's under the guise of deregulation too. And I'm sort of all over the place, but it doesn't make any sense to me that
So,
you could,
and
yeah. Go ahead.
I didn't mean to talk over you. Again, the challenge is that, it's really a matter of interpretation. And so folks ask me, and I was on a podcast a few weeks ago, and folks asked me, what Torin, how do you show up as consultant, and how do you help organizations given the immense amount of pressure that is being applied to the D&I space? How do you show up? And I said, I show up the same way that I've always showed up. The work that we do, and the work that I've always done, marries the business methodology with the social imperative. There is absolutely a social imperative amongst your stakeholders to feel like they belong at an organization, to feel like their voice is being heard at an organization, to feel like they are being seen for their contribution and their accomplishment inside of an organization, that their acumen is not being overlooked or suppressed. And when I read executive orders like the second one saying that we're getting back to a merit-based system, it really is disingenuous. And in some ways, it's infuriating. It's degrading. It suggests that when we have pursued diversity and inclusion over the course of the last 5, 7, 10 years, that we've done something around the essence or formula of lowering the bar. And it has been nothing but Sure, you have those outliers who were chasing ambulances and didn't know exactly what they were doing, or they were capitalizing on the moment of a certain situation. But for the large part, most of us have rooted in how do we build high performing, inclusive, and representative organizations. And when I think about this anti woke AI bill, I just can't help but wonder, how will it impact how our tech solutions are built going forward? Here's an example that I try to share with people, Mike, when I'm in conversation, be it from stage, be it in recording such as this. Just at any given point, let's just say that you have 10 candidates that you're evaluating, and you are as the recruiter, you feel good about 5 of them, and you present 5 of those candidates to a hiring manager, and the hiring manager says, I'm only going to talk to 2 or 3. What do you do with the 2 or 3 that are not moved forward? You simply go to them and you say, they chose to go in a different direction. That's normally the feedback we give them.
Yep.
We chose to go in a different direction. We picked the 2 or 3 that we felt were the best, and we're moving those 2 or 3 forward. What I didn't say in that conversation is oftentimes those 5 finalists are white men. And we normally just go back to the 2 or 3 that weren't chosen and say, we chose to go in a different direction. Why is it that if we are focused and intentional about increasing representation, and we look at our slate and we say, well, we don't have any representation, I am simply going to go to the 2 or 3 and say, we're choosing to go in a different direction. That is all I am going to say. That is not me showing that I am, that is not showing some degree of prejudice or exclusion. It is the same way that we've recruited over and over and over and over again ever since I've been recruiting. And I started recruiting in 94. I started my first firm in 98. I got into consulting in 2011. It has been that way the entirety of my career in talent acquisition. And so I don't understand how anyone can justify and suggest that we have over-indexed in trying to be inclusive and representative. And so I am fearful that founders and others may read this executive order around anti-woke and think about or connect it to some of the other activity that has taken place in the D&I space, and just say to themselves, you know what? I don't want the hassle. I am fearful, Mike, that we may have founders that operate like the white glove law firms that went to the administration and put their hands up in the air and said, you know what, we're going to give you $1 billion of free legal services because we just don't want to argue with you. I'm fearful that they may be like some of the Ivy League institutions and say, forget it, we're just throwing our hands up because we want to keep the research dollars that are coming and other funding mechanisms. I'm fearful that too many of our HR tech or some of our HR tech providers will capitulate and put their hands up, and they will do that at the risk of impacting communities and groups of people. And that is what ultimately is going to happen. We will impact communities and groups of people, and it doesn't need to be that way.
It just doesn't. I mean, what he's doing, and it's something that came out of left field for me, that and it's kind of it's a nice strategy, but it's downright evil. Is he's tying the federal funding to adhering to his administration's policies. So if you want to work with the military, if you want to work with any of those like healthcare organizations that are tied to research funding or education, he's already shown it that he'll pull your funding or whatever. So you have to capitulate if you want to make a profit. And I feel that, just as you said, no one's going to make the stand because they'll lose their company. And so it will just continue to slide into this AI parody that's just reinforcing the things that we tried to stop in the first place.
Yeah, that absolutely is the challenge. And again, I get it. You know, capitalism, whether it be at the corporate level or in your own personal finances, you know, I get it. It's extremely important. I just want us as an industry, and that was the reason why I was so disappointed in the SHRM organization July of last year. You know, when they took equity out of the equation. Listen, I'm not new to this. I'm okay if we are, you know, willing to. How do I say this? I'm not trying to mince a choice of words, if you will, but it was in the grander picture. You, as an organization, represent, you know, 300,000, 400,000 individuals. I needed them to have a backbone. I needed them to be able to sit in those rooms and say, diversity and inclusion is not anything less than merit. It's not illegal discrimination. It's not undue examination or consideration as it relates to talent. It is everything that the Civil Rights Act stands for in all of the titles, all of the titles. And so I just wanted our organization that is supposed to represent our space to have more of a backbone and to walk with their back straight. And my hope is the very same as it relates to our founders and our leaders of current large tech companies, HR tech companies, that they continue to build solutions that do not perpetuate and cause harm to communities and groups of people. And you find ways to say, look, this is the way that our algorithm works. It is not going to provide any undue disparity one way or another. It is absolutely going to do. Listen, we had the example. I get it. They showed some examples of one of the LLMs bringing back, you know, representatives that didn't really match what history is. I get it. I don't know how it happened. I'm not that smart, but that's not the prevailing experience. The prevailing experience is that people with ethnic sounding names and resumes and recruiters don't get called back. The prevailing experience is that we don't have a high degree of representation. The higher up the ladder that we go, the prevailing experience is that more recruiters than not are not focused on providing representative pipelines of consideration, that different communities are falling out of the process earlier rather than later. There are certain managers excluding different communities, and they're not, and they're passing. We history is replete. It is replete with why we do the work that we do, and we don't need policy that further suppresses what little bit of momentum we gained over the last 3 or 4 years. And so I want people to fight back. You may not be as ardent in that fight as I am, or as you are, or as others are, but you must have a voice and say something. It is definitely good for business when I have a representative team sitting in various business units, departments, and teams across my franchise.
And if you don't understand the differences between people and their backgrounds, you can't hire from those communities. You're just going to end up hiring. Like, I grew up in the whitest town ever. There were maybe like 5 or 6 African American kids in my school. Everybody else was white and suburban. And you live in this bubble, and then you get out in the real world, and I'll tell you, it's tough when you don't have any experience, when you've been sheltered your whole life with diversity. But then when you meet these diverse people and you learn from their cultures, you always better yourself and you better your organization. And so I get despaired about what's happened over in the past year. It seems like they're not even trying not to say it anymore, but they're essentially saying that DEI or anybody of color or a different background and that's a hire is less qualified.
That's exactly what they're saying.
And so it's like, I'm not black, but if I had to fight against that my entire career to be like a pilot, let's say, and now they're going to say I can't be a pilot because of the skin color, That just doesn't make any sense. And anyone that grows up in, I would say, like the modern age now, like, that doesn't make any sense. It doesn't. But we're going back to the 60s. And so it's just I was so excited with AI that we were going to take 2 steps forward as a human species, and we're going to be able to do more. I've seen the AI implications in, like, medicine, for example. I can pump out I had a physical a couple days ago. I uploaded those results into GPT or whatever, and they told me exactly what I need to be doing with my life. We have all these great tools out there, but yet we're using them to go back into where we were 50 years ago.
But I firmly agree with you. We talked about it in the report that I released earlier this year, reducing bias in AI. I'm sorry, reducing bias in HR using artificial intelligence. One of the examples that we have inside of the report deals with the healthcare space and oximeters and the readings that were coming through, and or the reason why we would keep humans in the process. We've talked about a number of other examples inside of the report, because again, we have to make sure that we are intentional and we're conscious about how these different solutions experience performance drift. I want the solution to remain aligned with the business KPIs and objectives that we've set for it. And when we recalibrate, when we evaluate the performance, do we need to shift the KPI or the objective? Or is it, like I said a moment ago, is it performance drift? Is something happening and we need to kind of get back on course? We got to course correct. When I think about the woke AI bill, I dropped down to, I can't see what area, section 3. It says truth seeking. LLMs shall be truthful in responding to user prompts seeking factual information or analysis. And then B, it says ideological neutrality, which we talked about. LLMs shall be neutral, nonpartisan tools that do not manipulate responses in favor of ideological dogmas such as DEI. DEI is not ideological. And let me tell you something. I actually think about some of the conversations that I've had online with some individuals. I've had some interesting conversations with people who work in the indigenous community. I've had conversations with people who work in the Jewish community, and it's fascinating to me, sometimes disappointing, but fascinating to me when even some of them say we shouldn't have D&I. And I'm like, well, why? And they'll call it a Marxist concept or a Marxist ideology. And I'm like, but tell me, how do we get back to, one conversation I'm thinking about, the person said, I'm glad D&I is leaving so we can get back to the basics of doing recruiting or something that they said. And I'm like, well, give me 2 examples of what the basics of doing recruiting are. Just give me, and they couldn't give me an example. And so all I know is that I've read a lot, Mike. I've seen reports and studies that come out of some of the think tanks, left-leaning think tanks, right-leaning think tanks. I try to take in and ingest a variety of readings because I don't want to be off center. I don't necessarily want to be leaning in a way that, again, is dangerous or harmful to any one group or community of people. And so I just feel like if in fact we live out what they are trying to say in that bill, if we can get beyond the polarizing language at the very top and maybe focus on the substance of what it is that they're trying to do, you got me. Here it is. I mean, honestly, I'm okay with it. I want my LLMs and tech solutions to be truthful. I want them to not necessarily be ideological. I want them to not cause and perpetuate harm to different groups and communities. I want everything that bill says. It's the way that they approached the bill the language that they used, which was very polarizing and targeting and very specific to a group and community, mine, African American, Black. That's the way that I feel. So if we can get beyond that, then maybe we can, we can have some solutions that are hitting the marketplace that do better good and less harm.
And the thing that kills me is that these AI systems were basically designed to be as neutral as possible. Like that's how you
Sure.
get the code and you get the right. You want it to just spit out facts. But what I'm worried about now is we can't agree on facts. We can't agree on a reality that we're all living. I have a couple
But
parents
keep
that
it in
are.
mind. But Mike, keep in mind. Think about this. You said that they were designed to be neutral, which inherently suggests that neutrality, that's not what we see in how they learn. Those, when they ingest all of the language, all of the books, all of the research. I mean, think about the research that we've done, beauty standards, healthcare statistics. When we think about income, wealth gaps, and I mean, when you think about all of these different penal system, the GI Bill and how it was exercised, redlining back in the 60s. When you think about how you could get a loan in those times of redlining, all of that is what's going into these LLMs. And so when you say they were designed to be neutral, even that is problematic because it continues to suggest, all right, we did everything the way that we did it. It was all neutral. Let's keep rolling forward. And unfortunately, that's just not reality. And so I know you mean well when you say that. I just want us to, again, understand that even in our best and earnest effort to be neutral, to be fair, in the past, in many instances, we have not been. And so it is incumbent upon us that we have to look at these solutions differently as it relates to what do you call that? Medical testing trials. As it relates to trials, we got to get more different demographies and ethnicities into these trials and then start publishing information and saying, here's what we think is going to happen. We just have to do better around how we are evaluating the data in our city. If we want to build smart cities and thriving communities and explore what UBI might look like, because AI is displacing people, and how do we associate reskilling and upskilling the talent that's in the workplace today that may experience something different? How do we situate Mike and Torin and so many others to create their own digital twin that can work when they're not working? We got to look at all of that a little bit differently than we've looked at it in the past. The past has gotten us to where we are right now, but I would be one of the first to say, and certainly not the first, but I think I would be one of many who says, let's look at it a little bit differently as we move forward. And differently is the essence of diversity. It is the dimensions that I bring to this camera and the dimensions that you bring to this camera that allow us to vocally collide and have a beautiful conversation about what things look for going forward. And so I am absolutely cool with, and I smile even in that moment. It was designed to be neutral, but maybe that hasn't served us well.
But that's why we need people like you to be able to point out, because I didn't mean anything by it. I don't know.
I know you did.
And that thing is like you're assuming that these people passing the bills, they're all assuming that they know everything, And so it needs to be a collaborative effort to find out that truth. You need these guardrails in there. It says, well, it's not really neutral. It tries well, but it's excluding some things. So I love that. We're coming up on the end of the episode here, so I want people to know where they can find you and read your stuff, and if they can see you speak at any time, please go see Torin speak. Please, just do it if you see him at a conference. So what are you doing in the fall?
Yeah, so we may do a pop-up visit at HR Tech. And so if you're going to be there, by all means, I'm going to make sure we get that in real life hug in place. And I'm a hugger.
Exactly.
I know how to do the dap and the high fives and all that other stuff, elbow bumps, fist bumps, but I'm going to grab you, man. I'm going to bring you in. I'm just telling you right now. So you got to get it. Someone said to me a couple of weeks ago when I was on a recording, they said, Torin, your delivery is a little bit different. And I said, because before I crack a mic, I'm always listening to music and things that ground me in love because I want my voice and my presence and my aura. I want people to be able to feel me. I don't want you to just hear me. I want you to feel me when I am there. So, Mike, if I see you at HR Tech, you will feel me, bro.
All right,
So
good.
that's that. I got a couple of private conversations that are going to be happening, incredible conversations. Unfortunately, they're not open to the public, but I'm going to be just doing some truth telling, and nothing has changed, for me. And sure, business has been impacted. We've lost clients. We've lost mandates. We've not been called back on certain contracts that were sitting out there. But one thing about me is I don't waver. It is principle over technique. I don't chase money. I am chasing humanity. I have long said the ROI of D&I is greater humanity. I stand by that. And so I'm not chasing a dollar bill. I've never been an ambulance chaser. When I work, I am working because I am committed to one, the stakeholders in your organization, and then two, your shareholders. I'm going to do everything that I can from stage and in a mandate to make sure that I am focused on helping an organization. So if you want to find me, I'm at Torin Ellis across all of social media. We do this fun thing 2-3 times a week. I post AI over 50 because I do want folks over 50 to make sure that they continue to stay connected to the learning journey of artificial intelligence. And why? Because it's not going anywhere. So that's where I'm at Torin Ellis across all of social media.
Love it. I used to, when I first started writing about AI, I was like, this is not as good as people writing. Real content is going to take a premium, and that's great. But then I started to figure out people don't really read things as much as they used to anymore, and they don't really care who's producing the content as long as it provokes a thought or feeling with them. But thank you, Torin, for joining us, and thank you to all of our listeners for joining us for another edition of Totally Talent on HR.com.
Thanks for tuning in to the Totally Talent podcast by HR.com. We hope you find today's episode insightful and inspiring. Don't forget to explore more episodes and discover valuable resources at hr.com/podcasts, where you can listen to all of our podcasts. Until next time, keep leading with purpose and making a difference in the world of talent.